Bill, you around?
Yeah, I'm here, thank you.
Good.
I heard you had some questions.
Yeah, that's an understatement. I could probably talk with Simon for another several hours.
Go on.
Okay, alright. So, what I'd like to do is to say hello to everyone here who's listening, either Avalon members. When we say Avalon, of course, this is shorthand for the Project Avalon forum. And I'd like to say hello to any Project Avalon forum members who are listening, and also to anybody else out there, because I'm quite sure this is going to be hosted in a number of places on the internet. And I'd also like to say that I've been listening to this with very great interest, and there's certainly probably more good information in this interview conversation that's been taking place than you get in a very large number of interviews out there that are given a lot of prominence. And so I'd really like to thank Simon for that, because this is important, complicated stuff. And my entry point into all the jottings and notes and questions which I've got in front of me here is to talk about something that Simon mentioned. This is just a little quote of his which I wrote down. New Age nonsense. And in all the questions that Simon's received from many people in this interview and other interviews and conversations that he's had over a period of years, Simon, I would love to ask you, what is your view of the confusion and the disinformation and the misunderstandings and the mistaken beliefs that you must find yourself surrounded by, reflected back on you in terms of the questions that you're asking? How much of a problem is this, and how do you deal with this yourself?
It is a problem, Bill, because so many of these people are true believers in what they've hooked onto. They're not the ones who are spreading necessarily the disinformation. They are passionate believers, and they believe it's a salvation. And it's incredibly difficult. You cannot perhaps immediately tell somebody and put them straight, because the effect it would have on that person, they would go into denial, and they would suffer some very serious issues. And what I would do is to get them to think about where that information has come from, to look at the key points they've been given, and to try and get them to tell me why they think it's a realistic project or a realistic program, or why it has any sort of resonance with them. Now, if they're genuinely searching for something, then they need to search within themselves, and not for some fabulous system that's going to help them. My own understanding is that it was something spread, if not by the CIA, somebody very similar to the CIA, in terms of attempting again to deflect people from looking into themselves or thinking about the reality. And with the advent of YouTube and the internet, it is an incredible problem. And sometimes I have to walk away from it, Bill, because I can't convince someone to reevaluate, and I just have to walk away from it.
I think that's a really good summary, actually. It's very hard indeed sometimes when you've been asked a question and the whole premises and background of the question are flawed. Like, this is the sort of have you stopped beating your wife question. You have to go right back to the premises of which it's being asked from, and help the asker of the question to realize that their whole basis of understanding is wrong. And of course, this is one of the problems, isn't it? That you probably see yourself as a guide and a teacher, as opposed to only an informer and a relayer of information. Would you say that's right?
Yes.
And how do you handle the responsibility of that? Because sometimes I wake up in the morning, I think, this is an enormous responsibility I've got, and I'm asked so many questions and I can't even answer some. Sometimes I don't even get around to answering any of them at all. And there's so many people out there who are sincerely asking questions, and it's almost impossible to deal with it all. How do you handle that yourself?
Because each person who is genuine is asking a question that is vital to themselves, and therefore it needs to be answered. And it doesn't matter whether there's one question or 1,000 questions, they have to be answered because they are vital to that individual. And all I can do, clock's going to go, all I can do is honestly tell them what I have learnt either from security sources here on Earth, because my mother used to work for MI5 and my grandfather worked for MI6, and still have friends who pop in and visit, or talking about visits from off-worlders. I'm not a researcher, so the answers I give are those answers that I truly believe to be the case, and I'm very, very aware that, and that's why I always choose my words so carefully, that you can lead people down the wrong path. You can lead people to make decisions which are not good for them, and so it's incredibly important that that individual makes their own decisions, and that the information they get is something they add to everything else. And I always say to people, ultimately ask your soul, ask yourself what you think is right, and that's how I do it, Bill.
That's a really wonderful answer. Thank you for that. One of the things which you said, which I really want to underline, what you were talking about going into the light after you left the body. There's so many tricks and traps and layers of deceit and layers of deception all over the universe. People say as above, so below, and I always say, well, as below, so above. You've got so many layers of deception and intrigues and agendas and different groups on this planet. Why would we not think it's exactly the same everywhere else as well?
Yes.
I've got a question which is of quite some interest to myself. One of the things I've been watching for many years, as you have and many others have, is the multi-trillion-dollar program which you're aware of the construction of the deep underground bases, the deep underground cities. Not only the Americans have got them in China, they've got them in Russia, and some of them really are quite large. They've got a lot of stuff down there. And recently, Alex Jones has been drawing a lot of attention to the work of Joel Skousen, who has written an important book called Strategic Relocation. And his basic premise, and he feels absolutely sure of this, is that the grand strategic plan of whoever it is who's controlling this planet is to deliberately provoke or set up or instigate World War III, a major nuclear war, so that this in itself
I think someone's just pulled a plug on Bill. Hello Bill, can you hear? I think the NSA must have got angry, Bill.
What was the last thing you heard me say, and then I'll continue?
You mentioned strategic relocation and the different countries and Third World War, and then you cut off after Third World War.
Okay, right. So what he strongly believes and has analysed, he's a very intelligent, well-informed man. What he suggests that the plan is for a major nuclear war, which would be deliberately provoked. It would be engineered as a survival war, but with the justification that then you bring in martial law, then you bring the New World Order, then the so-called freedom fighters will all be arrested as terrorists, and that's what the camps are for. And that's like the sort of major global traumatic event that would usher in everything that they wanted. So I have two questions about that. First of all, and it's actually connected with the question of multiple alternative timelines and freedom of choice and that whole complexity. Do you see this as being possible, inevitable, Or would this be prevented by extraterrestrial agencies who would say, no, that's breaking the rules of the game?
No, it's possible. Most definitely is it possible. The problem is that those people who are implementing the plan are themselves lied to, because their understanding is that after a limited nuclear war, they would then emerge to be the sole rulers of the remaining humans on the planet. What they don't know is they're even being duped, because the whole project is to keep them underground, so that they remain underground and then they evolve into something that's not very human at all. But they wouldn't do that unless they thought there was a carrot at the end of it, and the carrot for them is, oh well, it's okay because we can emerge out of the ground and we will be rulers of all we survey. If you told them the truth, they wouldn't go down that road. Now that's the elite group that is on its own. There's a separate elite group that wants to retain the status quo, that doesn't want the nuclear war, that wants to control humanity by other forms. So that are the two groups, and I know what you're saying. I absolutely agree with that, Bill, because even people who are very wealthy film stars are know they have their bunkers already built, and so it's not just people think about the Illuminati. It's just not the top notch. It's actually quite a sizable group of people who have booked a ticket, for want of a better word, but think they're just going to emerge into the sunlight and everything's going to be fine.
Right. But you're still saying that the outcome of this game, so to speak, is not yet certain, that there are possibilities that could go in every which way about all this.
Yes, because, Bill, if outside interference was to so actively change that outcome, then really we'd have lost total free will. So I would grade it as a possible.
Yeah. Now, earlier on, you described the mantids as arbiters, which is a very interesting word, using the analogy of an umpire or a referee of a game. That implies that there are rules and agreements of the game. I presume we're talking about the way that the game is played here on planet Earth. What is it that would be such a violation of the rules of the game that interference would be required?
Humans making a decision, whatever that might be, and they've not been given the truth.
Right. Could you give a theoretical example of that, just to illustrate?
If you were to say, for argument's sake, to a general, we'll talk about what we were saying earlier, I want you to move this nuclear weapon from this facility, and I want you to pass it across to this group of freedom fighters. Don't worry, they're not going to blow it up. Everything's fine. And the general then does that. Then there would be interference, because the general had not been given the full truth. If the general is told, take this weapon and we're going to blow it up, then that is a full freedom of choice. So when somebody is being asked to do something, but they're not being given the full import of the real intention behind it, then outside forces would come in to balance it. Even after the balance, if those people still wish to destroy themselves, they will destroy themselves, because it was a level playing field and they made that choice having had all the information. Now that's on one timeline. That's on one timeline. At the moment we're on a relatively good timeline, and the interference, a positive interference, is maintaining us on that positive timeline. The negative influence is attempting to pull us off those tracks and put us back onto the timeline we were on some 15 years ago, something like that. And so that's really where the energetic battle is.
Right. So the rebalancing job of the arbiters, as it were, is to make sure that all the information is available to assist humanity to make balanced, responsible, optimum choices. It's not a question of them muscling in to physically interfere. It's an energetic rebalancing. That's what you're saying.
Yes, that's what I believe.
And what that then implies is that you yourself are an asset in that rebalancing process, right?
Correct.
And how many, maybe this is an impossible question to answer, but you'll get where it's coming from. How many others are there, or what proportion of others are doing the same job?
We are deliberately not told, because you would have a security breach bill. One person cannot know and cannot be used as a connection to another, because if you had that connection, if one person was taken out or corrupted, it would give the enemy an access to everybody else on the planet. So each individual operates in a bubble, so that if they are compromised, they don't break down the whole system.
That's a wonderful answer. Okay, I love it. But it would be reasonable for you to suspect that there are many people performing this function, all independently, but in different cultures, different languages, using different media. Would you say that's reasonable to assume?
I would definitely say that that is the case, although each individual or each individual groups who have joined together would each have formulated their own way of assisting, and would be doing it. For instance, there are groups of people on the planet who are attempting, as we speak, to reduce the radiation pollution coming out from Fukushima. There are groups of people who are attempting to change many things that they see as negative. So they are operating in a different way from me, but it is for the same outcome. It is for the outcome for humanity to be in a position to make a choice. So yes, I would agree with you, Bill.
Okay, here's a question that you may have been asked before. Such an arbiter occupying a human body, or are you a human who's agreed to assist?
They made it very clear to me that my soul is composed of three parts, as a percentage: 33% reptilian, 33% mantid, and 33% human. People who are in the know say they've never seen such a complex creature that's surviving. In other words, it technically is not possible I should be falling to bits. It had to be balanced, because it has to be free will. No one part of me must be more dominant than another part, although certain situations require that particular part of me to become dominant. My choice as a small boy, when I was asked to choose between my mentor being a reptilian, Draconis reptilian, or a mantid, I chose the mantid. Therefore the mantids are my mentors. I'll let that clock go. I have a very strong memory of 1971, when I was away for 2 days and had what people would describe a UFO experience, and had gone public with the soul agreement, or agreement that I made with the mantis. And I made that agreement because they are my family. So the soul, the 33% that resides in my body, at some point resided in a mantis body a very long time ago, and I am merely fulfilling a council-wide decision that was made a very long time ago, ready for when humans reached the point they reach now. And there, as you said, Bill, there are many people doing their own thing, and doing it for the good.
Okay, going back to the reptilians then, does this imply that not all reptilians are actually operating to the same agenda? That to just describe all reptilians with one broad brush actually would be very unfair to everything and everyone that all the reptilians are. We're just talking about the actions of the different factions. Is that right, or do I have that wrong?
It is right. I mean, my experience with what I would refer to, or researchers would refer to, as the Draco reptilians. These are the most negative reptilians that interact on Earth. But I'm also aware of and have met what I call native reptilians. And there's one other group of reptilians from another star system. They are all on a sliding scale negative to humanity, but just as in humans, some rebel, I suppose that's the right word, against the teachings or against their culture and against their ritual and their ceremony, and set themselves up. It's much harder for them because they have a connected mind, and it tends to be small groups on outlying positions, but they then will attempt to connect with humans because they are from a background that doesn't see any harm in connecting with humans and interfering with humans. They will physically come in, if I can use that word, for the good, and do things that perhaps you might be surprised at, but ultimately their goal is not they care about the humans necessarily, but they are just at war with the larger group. So it's almost as if it's a way of getting back at the larger group.